always nice to see whole families together, families with their kids and grandkids and sons-in-law and daughters-in-law. And I'll bet I know how you're going to spend the afternoon together. And for those who are watching this as a streaming video, probably you're going to be at home. But how many people here plan on this day of the resurrection to go to the cemetery? As a matter of fact, that's a very logical thing to do. You know, in the United States, we go on Memorial Day, maybe. As Catholics, it's a good idea to go on November the 2nd, All Souls Day. We might go to the cemetery on the anniversary of the death of a loved one or his or her birthday. But how often is it that we go on the day of resurrection? And if we go, our experience will be different than those women who went to the tomb. When they went to the tomb, or I should say when we go to a cemetery, it's probably a pretty familiar place. We may have other people buried there. We've been there before. It is in many ways a place where we seek peace. And when we go to the cemetery, it's to muse on the past, those great memories that we hold right here of our deceased loved ones. But I'd suggest to you that that day, when those women went to that burial ground, it was a very different experience. Rather than finding peace, they were amazed. They were amazed that Jesus was not there, that he had been raised. And rather than musing on the past, Jesus sent them to the future. I mean, that's what he will go forth to Galilee before you. It's a very forward-looking statement, isn't it? He said to them, "Do not be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, the crucified. He has been raised. He is not here. He is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, as he told you." The fact that that young man has to tell these women not to be amazed means that they were amazed. I mean, why else would he say that to them? And going before them to Galilee is clearly a forward-looking statement. So what do we do? What do we do with all this of Easter and he is risen? Well, it's always good to fall back on one of the great axioms of the church that came from St. Anselm. Faith seeking understanding. Fides quaerens intellectum in Latin. If you stop to think about it, the New Testament is filled with instances in which Jesus is trying to get the apostles to understand. And just as much we find in the New Testament and the Gospels that they don't get it. They're thicker than you know what. For them, it was a very long process to move toward understanding. In evidence of that, the verse immediately following the last verse of Mark's gospel that I read for you is this: "Then they went out and fled from the tomb, seized with trembling and bewilderment. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Faith depends on testimony, and faith resides in the heart. Understanding depends on reason, and we in this culture say reason is in the head. So they go back to Galilee, back home to where they started all together, where they had spent so much time in his presence. They go back to Galilee, to their ordinary lives, as if anything could ever again be ordinary. They go back to start over again with a growing understanding and awareness of what really happened. It is what they had seen back in Galilee, that place of the ordinary, that nourished their faith as they were seeking understanding. It was going back to Galilee that helped them overcome the trauma of Jerusalem. And thanks be to God that Peter and the others did overcome that. As we hear in today's first reading from the Acts of the Apostles, Peter proclaims, "We are witnesses of all that he did, both in the country of the Jews and in Jerusalem. They put him to death by hanging him on a tree. This man God raised on the third day and granted that he be visible, not to all people, but to us, the witnesses chosen by God in advance, who ate and drank with him after he rose from the dead." And the fact is, the witness is so important that we wouldn't be here today without somebody else's witness. Maybe it was parents or grandparents. Maybe it was a friend who gave witness. And it is true that sometimes witness is given by shedding one's blood. That's true. That's what martyr means. But more likely, the witness that you and I have received came from good example, from just plain dogged determinism. Faith seeks understanding. An active love of God seeks a deeper knowledge of the one who is loved and who loves us. And it's so important for us to hold fast to the truth that he is risen, because we can never deny that our faith, with some understanding, is first of all strange. Secondly, it is frightening. And third, it's difficult to believe. So who wouldn't say that believing and proclaiming that a dead man has been raised from the dead is not strange? The fact is that we kind of fall back on things like butterflies and Easter eggs because we find it so difficult to talk openly and to deal directly with what it's all about. It's not about butterflies. It's not about Easter eggs, is it? But we use those because what we believe is strange, that he rose. Secondly, what we believe and coming to understand is frightening. Throughout the New Testament, Jesus is Lord. That's one of the statements that's constantly made. Jesus is Lord. But that's a copycat of the Roman statement that Caesar is Lord. In other words, these early Christians and we, their descendants, in proclaiming that Jesus is Lord, declared that his resurrection from the dead relativizes all earthly power. That's frightening. It was frightening to the Romans. It's frightening now that the resurrection relativizes all earthly power. And finally, what we believe and are coming to understand is hard to believe. I don't know how many times during the NCAA tournament, somebody will say, one of the broadcasters, that was unbelievable, whether it was a guy that made a three-point shot from the half-court line or just a marvelous pass to somebody cutting into the lane, whatever it was. How often do we hear in sports, that was unbelievable? And we say that of something we just saw. How much more difficult is it to believe what we have not seen? And so, what we gather to celebrate is strange and frightening and difficult to believe. Our faith seeks understanding. It was a long road for those disciples from Jerusalem. And on our pilgrimage, we seek understanding, and we hold fast to our belief as we encourage one another. For he is risen.